Summer, 1870, a federal enumerator walks up to a cabin in Mississippi, opens a ledger, and asks a black man his name. The man gives it. The clerk writes it down. That moment is, for nearly 4 million people, the first time in the recorded history of the United States that their name appears on any government document. Not their age under somebody else's name, not a tally mark in a column of property. Their name. 16 of those surnames are on mailboxes across America tonight, and where they came from is not what you were told. This is a countdown of 16 surnames from 16 to 1, and I want to be exact about where the list comes from. The last 10 are not mine. They are the federal government's. The 10 surnames the U.S. Census Bureau's own 2010 surname file identifies as the most concentrated among black Americans in the entire country. Straight off the table, in order. The first 6 are individual cases where the record shows us precisely how one family got its name and who decided it. But the whole video rests on one fact, so let me put it down properly. Genealogists call it the 1870 brick wall. Here's what it actually is. In 1850 and 1860, the federal census used a separate form for enslaved people called a slave schedule. On that form, the enslaver's name was written at the top. Underneath, the people he held appeared as a column of entries: age, sex, color, no names. A 60-year-old woman who had raised 9 children and buried 4 is a line reading 60 FB. That is the entire record of her existence. Think of a hotel guest book where the manager writes down his own name and then just the number of people in each room. 100 years later, you can prove the rooms were full. You cannot prove who was in them. 1870 was the first federal census taken after abolition, and it had no slave schedule because there was nothing to schedule. Everyone went on one form: name, age, sex, color, birthplace, occupation, value of real estate, value of personal estate, whether the person could read, whether they could write, whether they had married within the year. So for millions of American families, the trail does not fade out before 1870. It stops hard at a wall because the paper on the other side was never written. Now hold that, because the surnames are about to tell you something the wall does not. Number 16. Number 16, Hunt. The plainest example of the thing almost everybody gets wrong. In 1862, in Warren County, Mississippi, a man named Stephen and a woman named Eliza and their children were listed as property in the estate inventory of John Hebron. That is the document that proves they existed. When freedom came 3 years later, Stephen and Eliza did not become Stephen and Eliza Hebron. They took the surname Hunt. Nobody made them. There was no clerk standing over them assigning it. They picked a name that was not the name of the man who had owned them, and they gave it to their children, and their descendants carry it now. The Hebron estate inventory is where you find them enslaved. It is not where you find their name. Number 15, Bailey. The most famous surname in this history is the one that got thrown away: Frederick Augustus Washington. Bailey was born enslaved on Maryland's eastern shore and escaped north in September 1838. In New Bedford, Massachusetts, a black abolitionist named Nathan Johnson was sheltering him and reading Walter Scott's poem, The Lady of the Lake. Johnson proposed a surname out of that poem. Bailey accepted it, and it is the only name most Americans have ever known him by. Understand what that decision was. A man who had been legally a thing chose the word the world would call him. Bailey was the name slavery gave him. Douglas was the name he answered to for the next 57 years. Number 14, Baumfree. Isabella Baumfree was born enslaved in Ulster County, New York, and freed under New York's gradual emancipation statute. The North had slavery too, and it did not end quietly. She kept the name Baumfree for 16 more years. Then on the 1st of June, 1843, she left New York City and told the people around her that she was not Isabella anymore. She had taken a new name, and she had chosen both halves of it herself. Sojourner for the traveling she intended to do. Truth for what she intended to say. No enslaver was involved, no clerk. That is a black woman in 1843 exercising the one power that had been withheld from her entire family line, the power to say what she was called. Number 13, Ross, Araminta. Ross was born enslaved in Dorchester County, Maryland, and the household called her Minnie. Around 1844, she married a free black man named John Tubman and took his surname. And then she did something people forget. She dropped Araminta and took her mother's name instead. Her mother was Harriet Ross, called Rit, who had spent years fighting to keep her children from being sold south. So the name is not one choice, it is two, stacked. A surname from a free man and a given name lifted directly off her own mother, Harriet Tubman. Everything about that name is a claim on family, made by a woman whose family the law refused to recognize as a family at all. Number 12, Carver. This is the entry that fits the stereotype, and it is here on purpose because the stereotype is not wrong. It is just far less common than people assume. George Washington. Carver was born enslaved around 1864 on a farm near Diamond, Missouri, belonging to Moses and Susan Carver. He kept the name. He was an infant when slavery ended, raised by the Carvers after his mother Mary was taken in a night raid and never recovered. So yes, sometimes the surname really is the enslavers, and sometimes there is a complicated reason underneath it. What you cannot do is assume it. That assumption has sent more black family researchers down more dead ends than any other single mistake in this field. Number 11, Lincoln. Now the one everybody guesses, and the record says no. The intuition is obvious. The man signed the Emancipation Proclamation, so surely free people took his name in enormous numbers. When the Census Bureau published surname data with racial breakdowns from the 2000 count, there were about 16,000 Lincolns in the United States, and only around 14% of them were black. Compare that to what is coming in a minute. Free people were not, on the whole, naming themselves after the president. They were doing something more specific and more personal, and the top 10 is going to show you exactly what. Number 10, Rivers. Here begins the federal government's list. Rivers is ranked 897th among all American surnames, 38,662 people, and 50.9% of them identify as black, the 10th most black concentrated surname in the country. Now watch what happens with a name like this, because it is a topographic name. It describes a place, rivers, banks, ford, waters, hill. When free people chose names off the land, they were doing what English and Scottish families had done 6 centuries earlier for the same reason. A name has to come from somewhere, and where you live is somewhere. Nobody assigned Rivers. It is the country a family lived in turned into a word they could hand down. Number 9, Dorsey. Ranked 793, 43,631 people, 52.2% black. Dorsey is heavily a Maryland name, and Maryland matters here more than almost any other state because Maryland had one of the largest free black populations in the country before the war, alongside a large enslaved population. The two lived in the same counties, in the same churches, under the same surnames. If you carry Dorsey and your line runs through Maryland, do not assume your ancestor was enslaved in 1860. Check. Some Dorseys were free for generations. One of them, Decatur Dorsey of Howard County, was born enslaved, enlisted in the 39th U.S. Colored Infantry, and came out of the war with the Medal of Honor. Number 8, Charles. Ranked 548, 61,211 people, 53% black. And now I'm going to do something I think you will respect more than a guess. The Census Bureau file records that this name is concentrated among black Americans. It does not record why, and I have not found a source that establishes it. What is visible in the record is that Charles is a given name doing the work of a surname, and that pattern of a first name hardening into a family name is common in places where naming ran through French and Caribbean practice rather than English. That is a pattern, not a proof. For a name like this, the only thing that can actually answer the question is your own family's paper. I am not going to invent an origin story for 61,000 people. Number 7, Jackson, the giant. Jackson is the 19th most common surname in the entire United States. 708,099 people, 240 for every 100,000 Americans. And 53% of them are black. Sit with that scale. There are more black Jacksons in America than there are people in most American cities. This is what mass naming looks like. When 4 million people needed surnames inside roughly 5 years, the names that already carried weight in the culture absorbed enormous numbers of families at once. And Jackson was one of them, which is also why Jackson is one of the hardest surnames in the country to research. The name is so common, it identifies almost nothing on its own. Quick thing, then straight back. If your name has already come up, or if you are 7 deep and still scanning, subscribe now, because the top 3 are where the real story is, and after them, I'm walking you through exactly how to get over that 1870 wall. Most of it is free. Number 6, Mosley, ranked 730, 47,963 people, 53.2% black. Mosley is an English place name surname that arrived in America through Virginia and the Carolinas, and then concentrated over a century and a half almost entirely on one side of a color line that the name itself does not describe. That is the strange thing this census file keeps showing you. These are not African names. They are overwhelmingly British names, carried west by British families, attached to enslaved people, and then deliberately kept in most cases by people who could have dropped them. The word is English. The decision to keep it was not. Number 5, Joseph, ranked 313, 100,959 people, 54.2% black. Same honesty as with Charles. Joseph is a given name functioning as a surname, and I am not going to pretend the federal file explains it. What I will point out is that Joseph is also a biblical name, and biblical naming ran deep in black communities in 1865 for a reason anybody who has read the Old Testament will recognize instantly. The story of Joseph is the story of a man sold into slavery by his own kin, carried into Egypt, and raised up. That book was preached in those churches constantly. Whether that drove the name, the record does not say. Number 4, Banks, ranked 292, 105,833 people, 54.5% black, nearly 100,000 black Americans on one name. Banks is topographic like rivers, and there is a second thread worth knowing. Nathaniel Banks was the Union general who ran the labor system in occupied Louisiana, and thousands of formerly enslaved people passed through contracts and registers bearing his name during the war. Whether that fed the surname at any scale, I cannot prove and will not claim. What I can tell you is that a name this common with a black share this high is not an accident of English migration. Number 3, Booker, ranked 941, 36,840 people, 65.2% black, the third most black concentrated surname in America. And the jump from here to number 2 and number 1 is enormous. Booker is also the name that gives you the thread into the top of this list, because in 1856, on a farm at Hales Ford in Franklin County, Virginia, an enslaved woman named Jane gave her son the name Booker Taliaferro. He did not know he had a middle name for years. What he did with the surname is number 1 on this list. Number 2, Jefferson, ranked 615, 55,179 people, 74.2% black, 3 out of every 4 Jeffersons in America. And there's a man who can tell you exactly how it happened in his own words, in print. Israel Gillette was born at Monticello around 1797. His parents were Edward Gillett and a woman named Jane, and they had 13 children. 12 of them were named Gillett. When Thomas Jefferson died in 1826, 130 people were sold off the mountain to pay his debts, and Israel's entire family went under the hammer. He was bought by Thomas Walker Gilmer. Years later, his freeborn wife, Elizabeth, helped him purchase his freedom, and in 1844, the two of them walked into the courthouse at Charlottesville in Albemarle County to collect his free papers. The clerk, a Mr. Garrett, asked him what surname he would take. Israel hesitated, and the clerk suggested Jefferson because, he said, The man had been born at Monticello, and because it would give him more dignity to be called after so eminent a man, Israel consented. He published that account in the Pike County Republican in Ohio on December 25, 1873. 55,000 Americans carried that name, and the man at the front of the line got it from a white clerk who thought it would suit him. Number 1. Washington, ranked 145 in the entire United States. 177,386 people, and 87.5% of them are black, the single most racially concentrated common surname in America, by a distance nothing else comes close to. Nearly 9 out of every 10 Washingtons in this country are black. There is no other name in the federal file that looks like that, and it did not come down from George Washington's household. He held people at Mount Vernon his entire adult life. He freed 123 of them in his will, effective on his widow's death, and Martha freed them on the 1st of January, 1801. That is 123 people. It is not 177,000. What happened is that after 1865, tens of thousands of families independently reached for the same word. Here is one of them in his own account. A boy born enslaved at Hales Ford, Virginia, walked into a schoolroom for the first time and realized every other child had 2 names and he had 1. When the teacher asked him for his full name, he did not hesitate and he did not ask permission. He said Booker Washington. He picked it on the spot, standing up, and he wrote it down years later and up from slavery so that nobody would have to guess. That is what the 87% is. It is not inheritance. It is 177,000 people descended from ancestors who, given the first free choice of their lives, chose the biggest name in the country and put it on their children. Now the science, because this is where the wall actually breaks. Every generation, your parents' DNA is cut and shuffled before it is passed to you, and long unbroken stretches survive intact for a few generations before the shuffling grinds them down. When 2 living people share one of those long stretches, geneticists call it identity by descent. The segment is identical because it descends from the same ancestor, not by coincidence. That is the entire machinery behind autosomal DNA cousin matching, and it does not care whether a courthouse burned. For Black American families, this matters in a very specific way. The genetic record shows European ancestry in Black Americans entered overwhelmingly through the male line. A study in the journal Human Genetics measuring 93 black men found European ancestry highest on the Y chromosome at roughly 28.5% against about 20% across the rest of the genome. The practical consequence is that many black families today have documented DNA matches with the descendants of the families who enslaved their ancestors. And those white families very often kept exhaustive paper, wills, deeds, estate inventories, bills of sale. The match points you at the archive. And now the honest word, because this channel does not deal in wishful thinking. A DNA match tells you that you and another person share an ancestor. It does not tell you which ancestor, when, or on which side of the ownership line they stood. It cannot prove your great-great-grandmother was the woman listed as 60 FB on a slave schedule. Only documents do that, and the surname is a lead, not a lineage. That is the whole point of this list. Herbert Gutman, in The Black Family in Slavery and Freedom, went through the interviews of 181 formerly enslaved people in South Carolina and found that nearly 3 in 4 carried a surname different from their last enslavers. In Texas, it was 2 in 3. Gutman also quoted a Georgia slaveholder's daughter, Eliza Frances Andrews, writing in her diary in 1865 that the freed people she watched almost never took the name of their present owner. They took the name of some earlier one, and they went back as far as they possibly could. Read that again, because it turns this entire video around. They were not inventing names in 1870. Many of them already had names used privately on their own farms, deliberately hidden from the people who owned them, sometimes for 3 generations. 1870 is not the year black families got surnames. It is the year the United States government finally wrote down names those families had been carrying in secret the whole time. The record vanishes before 1870. The family does not. It was there the whole time, holding a name the ledger was never allowed to see. So here's how you get across. Find your people in the 1870 census first, free on Family Search, and then do not stop at your household. Read 10 pages either side. Freed families stayed clustered, and the white household nearby with your surname on it is your suspect. Genealogists call this cluster research or the fan method, family, associates, neighbors. Then take that white surname to the 1860 slave schedule for the same county and look for a person matching your ancestors' age and sex. That is a lead, never a conclusion. Then go after the enslaver's own papers, which is where your family is actually written down by name. Wills, probate inventories, estate divisions, deeds and bills of sale held at the county courthouse and increasingly digitized free. And use the 2 record sets built specifically for this. The Freedmen's Bureau records, digitized and free, include labor contracts, marriage registers, and complaint files naming both the freed person and the former enslaver on the same page. And the Freedmen's Savings Bank registers from 1865 to 1874, where a depositor opening an account was asked to name his parents, his brothers and sisters, his children, and the plantation he came from. The single richest genealogical record of black families in the 19th century, and it is free. Tell me in the comments, which surname and which county and state in 1870? Name the county, because that is the only thing that turns a surname into a family. Next video, we go straight into those Freedmen's Savings Bank registers and read what people actually wrote in them. Some of those entries, name a mother, a father, and the man who sold them. Wait until you hear the names on those pages.